All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. I know it takes a few seconds to kind of connect to your video or your audio, so just take your time. We're just slowly opening up for you here today. Great to see you. I'll just contextualize what's going on here today. So this event is part of Concordia University Center for Creative Reuse series that we're hosting via Fourth Space. It's a series of making sessions. So far we have drawn, we have collaged, and today we are sewing. Just to let you know, you'll see one of the video screens here on your screen shows Fourth Space, and I'll just tell you a little bit about Concordia University's Fourth Space, which is located in the downtown campus of Concordia. We collaborate with our community of staff, students, researchers, faculty members to basically make the various initiatives, the research activities publicly accessible through any kind of interactive experiences. So that's why we're super happy to collaborate with CUCCR to make these sessions happen here today for you. I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that Concordia University and Fourth Space is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanyankahawga Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. As you have already noticed, because you've come in here, we are running this event in a meeting format, which means that it's like a regular Zoom meeting where you can have your video turned on, your audio turned on if you're comfortable doing that. Of course, if you rather kind of stay muted and stay behind the scenes and simply use the chat to communicate, that's entirely up to you. But we wanted you to allow, this kind of fostering the feeling of you coming into a space together and almost like sitting around the table together as though you would have been inside Fourth Space if we were able to host you there. So please feel free to join us in any way that you choose. You'll notice that we've also highlighted the SOCAN. So we're live streaming this event on Facebook, but none of you will be visible there. We'll just have a one camera that is pinned the entire time, which is the SOCAM, and you'll see Chloe's hands working there as she kind of, there she is, as we go through the workshop. So I called it a workshop, but actually it's just the making session. Chloe's here to kind of loosely facilitate it along with Ariane and Anna from CUCCR. So on that note, I'll pass it over to them. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, welcome. It's so wonderful to have you all here. And this is our third, like Anna mentioned. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about CUCCR. Ariane is in our space, which is really wonderful that he can be here to show you. I'm coming in from home. But the Center for Creative Reuse opened in 2017. So we will be celebrating our 4th birthday pretty soon. But as you know, the last year has been a little bit strange. We're located on the downtown campus in the Gray Nuns building. This depot has the ability to collect usable materials from on campus. So we really we focus on material diversion from offices, studios, departments, things that are on campus. And then we fill out the shelves in this space and make them available for people to take for free. So in normal times, you would be able to come and join us and visit, sign up to become a member, which I said is free, and then shop our shelves to find new materials to make with. And so we've been embarking on this new way of getting materials out to you, which is definitely different than you coming and joining us in the space, where we sent out all of these packages, these care packages of materials. And I'm curious to see who received them, because you're welcome to participate in this event, even if you didn't receive a package, or even if it was a different package, not so. We sent out 600 packages to Concordians across all over Canada. And basically those materials have sparked these making events. Ooh, it's making me a little dizzy. The camera there. These um, packages have basically sparked making across Canada. And now we're holding these weekly sessions to get together. And like Anna said, it's very informal. We're just going to be showing a little bit about what we've been making. And I'd like to hopefully say hello to each of you and get you to say a little bit about yourself or about what you've been working on or what inspired you from the kit that you got. And then all of the work that we do over the next couple of weeks, we'll be gathering it together via email, and and then we're going to put together a digital show of work that was made with all of these materials. So that show will be in March 22nd. And we'll, if you signed up for a package, you're already on a mailing list that will be receiving more details for that. And some of you maybe have already sent us in a few images of things that you have made over this time. But really, this is just to carve out time in our schedule to make together. So we're really happy you're here. And maybe Erin would like to talk a little bit more about, yeah, whatever.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Arian. I'm the Material and Tool Literacy Coordinator here at the center. We have Chloe as well. Chloe has interned with us in the past. You can see her hands in the sew cam. So we've been having a category-specific cam every week that we've been doing these sessions to sort of have a sense that we're making with you as we're apart. So not only do we provide materials, but we've also been lending a lot of support to different faculty members and staff members during COVID. It's been tricky, but there's been a lot of requests for different things, helping departments make kits for students to help them succeed in this strange year. And one of the things was some tools and tool bags for the sculpture department. And we, over the last year or so, we collected a lot of the, if you have been to campus before, in the metro tunnel between the metro and our hall building, there used to be banners, giant sort of banners that had writing on them, things like that. And so what we did here at the center, we have some sewing machines, is we built these, or we sewed these tool bags. This one is kind of inside out. You can see the writing is inside. But we sewed these tool bags to fill with tools to go out to students that didn't have access to tools at home. So that's one of the other ways that we've supported students during this time. And I also went to the extent, I'll cover my ID number, but I used the same material. I made a little ID holder for my ID because the plastic cracks on the card. So I've found my sewing skills again that I discovered in high school. So that's been kind of fun too. But I'll hand it over to Chloe and see what she's up to.
Right. Okay. So I just started cutting up this piece of blue fabric that was in my care package. So that here it is. All my the envelope, I just took it all out so people can get an idea. And this really fantastic drawing by Andrew Woodall. Love it. I'll just move that out of the way. So got the blue fabric. This green one here, it says de Pardeur on it. Very cute. About this big. Not quite sure what I want to do with everything yet. So I'm just kind of taking an inventory kind of what I have to see what I want to make. So, and I'm already also getting this little cute daisy chain, this piece, very stretchy. Fabric over here. Small lace is like a pinkish red trim. Another pink piece lace. And this yellow one, really like the yellow onto the blue. And this tiny zipper it's about like 4 inches long. And I have a couple of buttons and spent a lot of time threading this needle earlier. And I'll probably have to revisit that several times. And I kind of sketched out what I wanted to make really briefly. Can't really see really well, but I think I'm going to make 2 pouches. And then one of them, the 2 pouches with the blue material. And one of them will have like this kind of dog ear buttoned corner because of the way that the fabric is cut. It's not like a complete rectangle, so I thought that would be fun over here. See it kind of, it's dog ear. So my goal is to not waste anything and to not cut out odd shapes. So instead of cutting this even and using it as an even piece, I'm going to try to work this into the design of the thing that I want to make, so that I'm not left with these scrap pieces. This one I think is going to be my trickiest one. Not sure what I want to do with it yet, and I don't think I'll finish today. So with that, I think I'm going to start sewing here and here to close it off on both by hand, entirely by hand, because I don't have a machine.
Chloe, did your kit come with a sewing needle?
Yes, it did. It was, my sewing needle was kind of jammed under the thread that I got, was like this. So maybe other people might find their sewing needle in the same way.
Yeah, this was one of the only kits that came with some kind of tool, because we just felt like it would be a shame if you had to go out and try to find a needle and thread. But I'm glad that worked. Most people have that, I guess.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about what other people had in their kits. I can imagine everybody got such completely different things. I don't know how much material is that sucker, and there's so many fun patterns. Just excited to see what other people have.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to show what they have been working on or what they got in their kit?
I didn't get a kit.
Oh, that's okay.
So I'm doing my own knitting and cross stitching.
Excellent. Do you have a lot of experience in that?
Cross stitch, yes. I've been cross stitching for about 30 years. So it's counted cross stitch. So I've been doing that for, like I said, about 30 years. And knitting, I tried knitting with knitting needles. I tried crochet and my brain just won't. So I use a loom. I use a knitting loom.
Great.
That works.
Oh, definitely. All right. Have you been working on any specific projects these days?
I'm working on a scarf for a friend. And I'm currently working on a sampler for another friend. It's a wedding sampler.
What does a sampler mean?
It's basically a cross stitch. It's it can be anything from just a bunch of different kind of stitches. You're showing off your stitching skills. It can be a saying. It can be a date. You know, like someone's wedding date. Right. And you add that with, I mean, I've done that before with their names and their date in a wreath of roses. The one I'm working on right now is 1 Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind. It's shaped the way the words are put. Actually, I can show it to you. I can show it to you guys. It would be easier if I showed it to you than explain it. The way the words are placed, they are in the shape of a heart. Nice. I'll get better light. Get myself situated in my chair and I'll get better light. Okay, let's just go into better light. Yeah, the one I'm working on now is it's for a friend of mine. a little bit late, but it's closing up on her first year anniversary, but
The thought that counts.
Yeah.
it's the stuff that counts. I kind of got sideways, but the sidetracked with COVID. So
Fair enough. Aren't we all?
yeah. So I don't know how well you can see it.
Wow. That is
Nice.
detailed.
Wow.
Beautiful. My goodness.
It's not quite finished. I'm almost done the poem, and then there's a little bit of flowers at the bottom, like the top. It's a little bit of flowers at the bottom, and then underneath I'll put their initials and their wedding date.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing. It's wonderful to see that.
A lot of fun. I really do enjoy. I tried the stamp cross stitch and did that for a little while, but it ran out of. There was no challenge. So counting cross stitch really has it's challenging because you have to count your stitches. One of the banes of our existence is as cross stitchers when there's a mistake in the pattern.
Right. I can
Yeah.
imagine.
It's horrible. It's horrible because you have to figure out if you can fix their mistake or whether you have to frog.
Mm.
Rip it out.
Yes, someone knows what frogging means. Yay! I say
Has
frogging.
anyone else done any cross stitch or embroidery in general?
Sorry?
Has anyone else done any embroidery? I was wondering if there was somebody that might have a different experience with that.
I've made a little bit of embroidery, and actually I'm working on a little project where I have a book with all these embroidery stitches, and I'm just doing samples for myself because I have another project that's eventually coming, and then I kind of want to see which embroidery stitches that I did that I like that I'll use in this other project. And go ahead.
I like the Lazy Daisy. And I also like the satin. The satin
Yeah,
stitch.
I have this book that I got from the library. I think there's 200 stitches in there.
Yeah.
Some of them are variations of the same stitch.
Yeah.
But I really like just the plainest ones possible, like the chain stitch and the blanket stitch. I like the French knots a lot because they're so simple and they kind of just
hate French knots.
Sorry, say that again.
I hate French knots.
Oh, they're so easy. Once you know how to do it, most people wrap the thread around the needle as it's sticking down. You have to wrap the thread around the needle that's sticking up, then put it down. That's what most people.
But on when you're using like a cross stitch fabric, like an Aida cloth,
yeah,
it's not easy because the knot will slip through. So I just avoid it by using seed beads.
Oh yeah, well I have those too, but the way you can avoid it on a cross stitch is you go around the thread twice instead of once.
Yeah, I've tried all different, and my sister can do them no problem. And I was the one who taught my sister how to cross stitch. She can do the knots no problem, but I don't know what it is, but they're the bane of my existence.
Well, I'm gonna comment, duplicate what Arian was saying, is that in this past year, I definitely rediscovered my love of sewing and also discovered that there were a lot of unfinished projects. So no new projects got started.
We all have UFOs.
Yeah.
I have a UFO that will never be finished because I started it for my mom, and my mom passed away last January.
Yeah, there's always time to start them and absolutely zero time to finish them. So one of the quilts that I was working on, I have all these beautiful the retail.
Yeah, you have scraps.
Okay, and so that's what I'm going to use today for the sewing. And then when I finish it, then I'm going to bring it back out for the embroidery, and along the stitch lines do some embellished embroidery or just kind of play with it. So
Nice.
I'm not in Montreal now. I'm buried about 1.5 feet under snow in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Okay.
So this is a perfect stay indoors activity.
Do you normally live in New Brunswick, or are you living there now?
I'm back here now. I've always kept my house, but I was in Montreal for I don't know, two and a half years. That's where I discovered the Ruche d'Or and CUCCR, and so thrilled to see Arian and Anna take it to where it is now. And really, in many ways, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more behind the scenes, but just not skip a beat in embracing the technology that is available to everybody, and to add another dimension to this type of activity. Because I mean, we always try to be, collectively try to be accessible, but this is in a way truly accessible for people who can't physically make it there, or just have difficulties, or when you have a snowstorm, then you just are able to still reach out to people and collectively work on something. I mean, there's the possibilities really now do become endless. So
Oh, absolutely.
great job, guys.
I'm doing with the community council, I'm doing trivia night like almost every 2 weeks.
Cool.
So, you know, the possibilities are endless when it comes to Zoom.
True. Wonderful. I'm curious to see what else people are making. Does anybody else want to share what they've been working on? You can, you're welcome to turn your video on or face it at your hands if you'd like to speak and you're not on camera, or you could also use the chat. We're welcome to do that. I see, Rachel, you have your box out again. What are you working on now?
Same thing as last week. I'm trying to make some Valentine's Day cards because I didn't get a kit either.
Right. Yeah.
So just using the trash that I've got around my house.
Cute. That's great. I'm glad you're just able to take this time to, make something together. It's really wonderful. It definitely doesn't have to be fiber related. I guess, yeah, I could show you a little bit about what I've been doing. It's not kit related either, but we have a huge bin of scraps in the depot space of things that are very small. Also, I made a series of cloth masks and had a lot of scrap from that as well. So I've been working on a thing called crumb quilts. Has anybody ever done a crumb quilt? So it's a really interesting process, and quilting for me in general is way too measured and exact. I find that really stressful and unpleasant. I'm sure it works for a lot of people, and maybe as I get better, I'll get more inclined to work with a more kind of technical right angles. But crumb quilting is really a cool middle place, because basically you just take 2 scraps of any size that have a straight edge and start attaching them together. And then you attach those together, and then you make another
It's a crazy quilt.
Yeah, crazy quilt. Yeah. So I mean I don't know all the technical terms, but yeah, just this idea that it can be much more irregular. I had to get out of this quilting mindset that it had to be so,
No, they're amazing because you can put everything in there. Any kind of fabric.
I know, this is a knit, and this is thicker, kind of kind of almost upholstery, and then it just keeps growing. And I'll cut blocks of one size eventually to match them together, I think is my next step. Or I could keep going and going bigger and bigger, but it just seems like such a useful way to use up that scrap bag that just builds, and then be able to kind of put together something completely random. Yeah.
this is where your embroidery is going to marry up with that project. That's what I was saying before. Like once I got all these scrap pieces, and some of them, if you've come across the term crumbs, they are little tiny pieces.
Yeah.
That you're making your crazy quilt from the crumbs.
Okay.
And so that's where your project will really pop, because once you get these little embroidery techniques, sometimes it's even just at the seams, you're just doing a little zigzag on one color, and you zigzag the other way with another color, or put these little beads here and there. Your project will really come alive.
Yeah,
It's
I
beautiful.
love that. The like
I have a
together.
I have a family quilt. It was made by my third great grandmother. And the dates on it are like 1787, 1792. And some of them they've used like church ribbons where someone's won first prize, pie making, or, they've used those in there too. So it's actually got the dates in there. It's not finished. So it's just the top. Just the crazy quilt. It hasn't been completed, it bound and quilted. But we were told, don't touch it. Don't do anything to it. Don't touch it. Because you touch it at this point and finish it and you kill the value.
Huh.
It's amazing. It's a crazy quilt. And there's everything from velvet to upholstery fabric in it. And it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And none of the colors you wouldn't think that some of the colors would match, but because there's every color from black to purple to yellow, and it's just such a beautiful thing. So what you're doing, Anna, really reminds me of that. And so when you're stitching it, if you can, stitch in a date.
Oh, okay.
Or stitch in a name, because in generations to come, as it's passed down, it will mean so much more, because they'll be able to see where it comes from, because this thing is it's just awesome. I passed it around to a couple of cousins, and so we've each kept it for like a month or two, so we can display it, sort of thing, and take photographs. And it's now with a cousin out west.
That's so neat.
It is mine because I inherited it from my grandmother, but I kind of feel like it's all the cousins. It belongs to all the cousins, because all of like our fifth great grandparents or fourth great grandmother basically stitched on it.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how so much textile work is really passed down. And I don't know, like, I don't think about that in the same way of other art practices, but textile, embroidery, and like knit things, I don't know, it just seems like maybe we recognize their usefulness and then also like continue to care for them throughout like our lives. But with fast fashion, I mean, that's the other thing, is like, this is fast fashion, something gross, and it would just become trash. Like, it was damaged clothing, and it was produced probably very cheaply on machines, but by kind of taking it apart and giving it some care after, like, maybe it will live on longer than it was intended, I guess.
Well, and Anna, you're giving new life to these scraps that we collect on campus. I think some of the ones that you're working with are from places like the theater department. So when they make costumes for productions on campus, you make a costume, but there's going to be offcuts. And so we now collect those offcuts and bring them to the center. And we've been struggling actually in the last year or so. It's like, what do we do with all these little, bits and pieces? And so this is one way to do that. And I have Donna here asking about, and this came up in last week's session, or even the collage session, was how do you create collage but with fabric? And so Anna, you're sort of tackling that. I know Suzanne, you were talking about that, I think last session or the session before, is how to create collage but with fabrics.
Well, you can, this is just me personally, but anyways, I'm going to go back with a little bit of history where the quilts really had a second life, if you will, because they were kind of known as grandmothers, works of labor and so on and so forth. And back in the day, I mean, there were flower companies that really vied for customers by printing their flower bags with usable prints. I know this would be a wonderful concept to bring back. And so they would use these scraps of flower bags, quote unquote scraps of flower bags, into quilts. And when the resurgence, if you will, of quilts came back, and I will tie into the collage in a second here, but it was these quilts from Gee's Bend by the sometimes some parts of the Gullah Geechee in southern US. And for whatever reason, it spoke to people. And if you see the quilts of Gee's Bend, there is not a lot of measuring going on. There's not a lot of pattern going on, and so on and so forth. And they ended up being very, very important in the American storytelling and using what you had. So if you're going to modern day quilting, I personally prefer ones that do not have a pattern. I prefer exactly what Anna's doing. I prefer to just start. I did a few that had a pattern. I just finished one, Arian, and Anna would have seen that on my Facebook. That was all done with leftover scraps from here and there, and it ended up being kind of nice, not too bad. But in terms of people who want to be a quote unquote non-sewer, there's two things I would tell you. Is if you feel that your sewing skills will make it look messy, go for it anyways. There's always a story to be told when you're making a quilt that comes from the heart, if you will. There's a story to be told with the fabrics that you're using. And also there's a story to be told with the legacy you want to leave behind. Having said that, if you really don't want to pick up a needle and a thread, there is a product for purchase, and it's called Stitch Witchery. And you can cut these, which is basically a fabric that's glue. And once you iron it, it glues it down, and you know, you don't have to sew. But I mean, experiment even with watered down school glue, brushed over lightly, or as Anna was saying last week, a flower paste, and get really imaginative. And like I said, I personally think quilting is all about storytelling and less about technique. And the more that I do quilt, the more I want to story tell and not have my quilt look like a pattern that maybe 10,000 people purchased online. And when I'm looking at Chloe, I mean, she kind of had a little story as she was showing us the fabrics. And there's a story, even the mindfulness of putting a needle and thread through fabrics. So because it can be calming, and you know, and people can tell a story when it's done, like, oh, I was really stressed, or as Sandra had said, you know, when her mother, my very first quilt was done 20 years ago when my mother was going through cancer treatments, which she unfortunately did not survive. But I always look at that, and the first thing I think of is my mom in a happy way when I look at that quilt. It did come from a fabric. And, you know, there were about 3 years ago when the quilt that I finished over the weekend, I always look at that and think, I was hand quilting that up and down with the needle and thread when my father was still alive, and we were at the cottage, and he wasn't very mobile, and I would stitch and he would tell me stories. So despite the fact that the quilt can have a story, the way you put it together can also have a story. And I know we concentrated a lot on quilting in this discussion, but there is collage, and there is just sewing a bag, and there's all these amazing transferable stories that can be brought together with sewing, or even like I was eating before, sorry, I have to go up and get a few more materials, but even if I didn't sew today, I would still consider it sewing because I'm getting to hear other people's stories.
I want to check back in with Chloe. It looks like you've almost stitched a full pocket there.
Yeah, almost. I'm almost there. I just restock my thread halfway through as expected. And like you were saying, I'm not a clean stitcher. Like, it's pretty messy. I'm not one of those, you know, I'm not a perfectionist at all, and I don't care for the technique of it. And I've never heard about this way of quilting, and I think that is really intriguing to me. I just, when I try to make stuff, I try not to leave any waste behind, so I try not to have any scraps. But maybe I might let myself make some scraps now to take on one of these really cool. What did you call it, Anna? Crumb
quilt.
Crumb.
Also crazy quilt. I think that is actually the best thing to Google. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. That's how I figured out how to do this. I saw it actually, there's a really cool Facebook group called the Upcycled Cloth
Collective.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
well, we should put the link in there. And it's a global Facebook group, and there are people from all over doing all sorts of different kinds of cloth upcycling. And somebody posted their crazy quilts, and it led me down sort of a whole rabbit hole of learning how to kind of piece together and learn that technique.
I see cool. Donna has her hand raised. Donna, did you want to talk?
Just very briefly, because I had a question about material coming from the previous discussion. I don't know if it's still available, but someone on FreeCycle had offered liquid starch. Could liquid starch be used as an adhesive? Because they suggested craft, but they were thinking of papier-mâché. You use it as an adhesive, like water glue, and so on?
Donna, I'm not a super sewing person. I just rediscovered it, but I would say probably it would work more likely with natural fibers than synthetics, because it would really make its way into between the fibers of the natural, so cotton or other natural fibers. But maybe Anna or some others have some thoughts.
Might not hold up if it were to be washed. Like it might be it might be a way to kind of adhere some things if you are creating kind of like a collage or a kind of stationary something, but the way that you would use it, I think it would wash out. That would be my thought. Sandra, did you have other thoughts about that?
That's good. So I mean, if I were just interested in making an image, if I wasn't making a product, like, I mean, an image like maybe a cloth collage, that if you wanted to preserve it, you would maybe just put it under glass or something like that, since you wouldn't have the option of washing. Okay.
It might also affect, the starch might also affect the color or the pattern of it as it seeps through. So if you were to just make a kind of a collage or a picture from the fabric, I might suggest using a clear glue instead of starch, because I think a starch might be quite opaque and give kind of a cloudy look. But I don't know.
I think too, over time, the starch would discolor the fabric, like it would yellow. And it would color the fabric. I think keeping with like Mod Podge or a fabric glue, I think that would be better.
Well, I know that like even basic flour paste was being mentioned, and this would be a freebie material. So I thought, well, that sounds, perhaps it has some application.
Yeah, will you try it? And I would love to know.
Well, if the person hasn't found a taker for their starch, but one thing though too, I was just wondering if you could mix the starch with other things, or use it even for painting. Does anyone have any ideas about something like this? Because we were talking about that in the drawing painting group.
I mean, I wouldn't see why not. You could even add some food coloring in there to change the color of it if you wanted to use it more as a painting medium. Or you could add some, I think Chloe was talking in previous session about adding things like spices that have their own color pigmentation. So you could add some turmeric into the starch, and then that would color it yellow, and that would stay. I'm also sharing, Donna, you brought up the sort of free cycle. For those of you in Montreal, this great group has popped up while we've been closed, and it was started by one of our CUCCR members. It's called CROW, Creative Reuse and Zero Waste. And it's kind of a free cycle-ish kind of page on Facebook. I'm putting it in the chat right now. And people are just posting leftovers of things that they have. It could be stretcher frame for putting canvas and painting with. It could be leftover paper supplies. There's been all kinds of posts on there. And it's certainly grown a lot since the beginning of the pandemic. Anybody else want to share? Rachel, how's it going over there? There's lots of action going on.
Going great. I was just cutting up a postcard, and I've got some HelloFresh bag that I'm making an envelope with.
Nice. What are you using to make your envelope? Are you gluing or taping it together?
I'm trying to tape it, but it's not sticking very well. So I think I might have to either find a stronger tape or glue it.
Right.
And I've got some washi tape too. I freaking love washi tape.
What's washi tape?
It's like this, it's tape that you can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share what they're doing? It doesn't have to be sewing related either. If you're crafting away right now, it could be whatever you're working on.
I'm working on a watercolor project.
Cool.
I didn't get a care package either, but I can show my project. It's like a monochromatic project, just some doodles. So
Nice.
that's what I'm doing.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Are you studying here, Clea, at
Yeah.
Concordia?
Yeah, I'm at Concordia.
What are painting and drawing maybe?
I'm in math and computer science.
Oh, okay.
So very unrelated.
Cool.
It's just like a hobby
Different
of
brain.
mine. Yes.
Nice. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. It's really nice.
How's it going, Chloe?
I turned it inside out, decided I didn't like this ledge, so I'm just reinforcing it a bit. And then I am debating whether or not to either stitch this to the exterior of the flat or to kind of sew it in on itself to make like a little nice seam, or like a, I don't know, just a hem there. But I don't think that'll look nice with my own stitching. So I think maybe the adding to it is the way to go as opposed to pulling it on itself.
Nice.
I was also thinking about this session and other ways that we use cloth and string and for repair. And we had a few, we got a little email and a message saying that somebody had repaired a blouse with some of the buttons that we had sent, and just thinking about mending and visual kind of ways to show that things maybe that have been damaged are kind of, you know, put back together. I don't know if anybody, do you mend your clothes, and how does that factor into your sewing or cloth practice?
I always sew my stuff. Just because clothing for me is, because I'm plus size, clothing for me is super expensive. I'm lucky that I was gifted a lot of clothing. So I'm always like, after I take something off, I always check to make sure there's no holes, and then it goes in the laundry. But I'm always mending my clothes, sewing on a button, reinforcing a button.
Yes.
Yeah. It's certainly a lost art that seems to be making a comeback as people realize the true cost of their clothing and the impact that it's having on people around the globe. That people will either purchase something that they know will last for a long time, purchase something that's made of natural materials to begin with, avoiding synthetics as much as possible. And if it does wear out, that they put more emphasis on either fixing it themselves or having it fixed by someone, so that they can have it much longer. And kind of like your quilt story earlier, Sandra, is maybe they pass on an item to a family member.
Well, I know that I've repaired a lot of clothes that I got, stuff that I wouldn't wear, stuff that I wouldn't be comfortable in, or stuff that was a little too small, and I've passed it on.
Yeah.
On to other people, because like I said, finding especially when you're going through transition, and what I mean is, it's the people who passed their clothes on to me had bariatric surgery, so they were no longer at the same, like they started the place where I am now. Okay, so they passed the clothes on to me, and now some of the clothes is too big, so I've repaired it and passed it on, because finding secondhand plus size clothing is really difficult. And new stuff is really expensive. And when you're going, like I said, when you're going through transition, you know, I mean, I've gone down probably 8 sizes in the last 4 years. You know, from 705 pounds to 375. So, you know, like, you have to repair and pass on. And once it's not repairable anymore, you basically donate it to, I think it's Salvation Army, but there's another place that takes like dead fabric, dead stuff, and they sell it by the pound to, especially old jeans. They can shred old jeans and make new fabric from it and make paper from it. It's awesome what they can do.
And household insulation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, well, Ariane and Anna might know this about me, that when I returned to Moncton, and I was very inspired by what I saw with the art hives and them, I started the repair cafe here in Moncton, and we would see sewing machines all the time in our repair cafe, and people would say, well, they're broken. So it is almost impossible to break an old sewing machine. And I don't say that lightly, like those things were incredibly tough. There's very few actual moving parts to them, or parts that need replacing. And so we'd have these sewing machines come in every time, and like, oh, this is my grandmother's, this is my great aunts, and you know, and people keep them for a reason, because those sewing machines have probably made clothes and quilts, and they just love the connection of having that sewing machine. But in the end, there are tension buttons on them. I think the older sewing machines might have 2, maybe 3, but let's say 2. And sometimes it's just a question of fiddling with that and going on a YouTube video and finding those tension buttons. We fix those machines, or we fix the tension in less than 5 minutes, and then off these people go with a big smile, knowing that they can use these sewing machines for forever and a day. So if you have an old sewing machine, old, and I'm talking maybe pre 1975, 1980, that there's very little to fixing it, and using it over and over again, and start telling your own stories. But you know, though most clothes that need repair, for the most part, it's just a simple sewing, you know, sewing straight or whatever. Doesn't even need to be straight. But don't overlook these old sewing machines that you think might be broken. And if you find them sometimes on Kijiji Marketplace, or sometimes given away on Free Cycle, give it a second look. Look up a couple of YouTube videos and try to bring those machines back to life.
And Letitia shared in the chat here, sashiko, which has become very popular, the idea of using embroidery to fix or to mend clothing, in particular jeans they were talking about, and searching the hashtag visible mending on Instagram, and lots of inspiring posts when searching that. Thanks, Letitia, for sharing.
That's such a good recommendation. I love that hashtag visible mending, and it definitely inspired me. I have a pair of jeans that I tried to do, you know, the thigh rub, so it's it repaired in that way, and with the intention that the stitching would be seen, but the stitching on that examples that they have are just stunning, and take really it takes like a kind of a normal piece of clothing to kind of a really beautiful artistic way, which I really love. Thanks for reminding me about that.
A note about if you do have clothes to donate, and we're in this tricky time of the pandemic where either donation sites are closed or they're overwhelmed with what they had before the pandemic started, is to find out what local shelters are in need of in your area, whether you're here in Montreal or elsewhere, wherever you're tuning in from today. There's a lot of need there, especially for things like socks, warm socks and warm clothing. So yeah, do check out places in your area that are in need. An unfortunate circumstance of donating to places like Salvation Army and other places is more often than not, a lot of clothes will be thrown out, and they'll have a much larger impact on the planet that way. So finding local, hyper-local places that are really in need of clothing is a better solution.
Brian, on Facebook this morning, I also came across, I don't remember if it was on a public page or something, but somebody had asked that same question, where to donate clothes, and somebody suggested a Facebook group for refugees or like newcomers to your city. And so perhaps looking into those newcomer Facebook groups to donate clothes directly to somebody in need is a good way of doing that, in addition to the shelters too.
There's a good one here in Montreal with the Welcome Collective. It's called Refugee Claimant Montreal, and it's a good place to post household items, clothing, furniture, and direct donate to a family that can use that, especially with all of the closures that Quebec is currently in. I mean, I know we are lifting them as of today in terms of some of the essential items, but from January to now, it's been really challenging. To all of the thrift stores closed, a lot of things deemed non-essential, like winter boots and socks and underwear. Those were all non-essential items, so many stores had to stop selling that. So there's, definitely a real need. That's a good reminder, Ariane.
In Montreal, there's Maison Benoit Labre. It's Labre. And they take like donations of feminine products and like new underwear and socks. It's a big need.
Yeah.
And they also need, I mean, I'm just putting it out there. Their van that they use for like transporting stuff and food and whatnot and helping to feed people, their van is like on oxygen. Let's put it that way. It's on life support. It's in really bad condition and they need to replace it. So any donations that, you know, like, I mean, people don't think that $5 helps or $2 help, but every penny really does help. And I know someone who works there. So she works there, and every penny that's donated actually goes to the people that they're helping.
So important.
Yeah. Remember that, you know, that person that's got their hand out, you know, outside the metro station, or that person that's got their hand, you know, holding a cup outside of whatever, you know, you might not think it's a big deal, but that loonie that you put in their hand, or you put in their cup, might mean they can have an extra hot cup of coffee that day.
Absolutely. It's also really important with our whole kind of mission to keep usable items out of the landfill. And, you know, the fact that somebody may not need that or be done with it in their own lives, definitely, if it can have another circle around it before it ends up in the garbage, the more we can kind of connect people that need it with somebody that is getting rid of it, the better we'll be for resources and just caring for each other too.
Yeah, my nephew, because he's got a little bit of anxiety and this pandemic is just over the top, he taught himself how to crochet. So he started with the granny squares, and then he moved on to making the quilts, and he moved on to making some ponchos, and now he's making sweaters. But the only problem is he can only wear so many sweaters.
Yeah.
So he's now giving them away.
Amazing.
He gave a couple to the Old Brewery Mission.
Amazing.
Yeah, and they're really nice. Like, I mean, he's using Caron wool, and you know, they're really nice sweaters, and they're heavy. Like, he showed me one. They're heavy, so it's perfect for someone who's like basically on the street, you know, for 12 hours a day.
Yeah,
especially in this cold.
But
yeah.
I just wondered too, if they're really well-made sweaters, is there any place where something like that could be put up for sale and auctioned for the the organizations?
Yeah,
because...
I see what you're saying. But for him, like, he's just, it's keeping him busy, keeping him occupied, and he's got too many to wear now. So he's just trying to finding a place to, you know, to unload them. And he knows that the Old Brewer Mission, or what's the other one? Bono. It's in the Old Port. Accueil Bono, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's just, you know, he's trying to do that. He's currently working on 2 more, and they're going to Dollaroo.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that we usually do that we didn't get a chance to do is we do when the students that live in dorms move out in April or May, I guess, and when the semester is over, we do a big clothing drive, and we collect a lot of usable material, like a lot of household things, a lot of clothing, and then direct donate that out. So those aren't things that we have in our material depot, really. We don't take any donations from off campus, and we don't have any clothes. We do have some household items in our new space because it's there's quite a turnover, and it's quite usable for students living on campus. But usually that project, we donate about 3 tons of clothing to Dollaroo and other charities around Montreal. And nice. Unfortunately, I mean, everybody moved out in such a quick and necessary swoop in this year. We weren't able to do that, but I do definitely see that kind of collaboration is really important for us to continue and being mindful and thinking about.
Clea talked about her hobby of doing watercolors as sort of a different brain kind of thing. And during the pandemic, actually, Anna and one of our colleagues who's, you know, a little bit older than us, taught himself how to sew, and he's been making lots of cloth masks. I think he's up to probably 400 of them at this point that he's made since the pandemic started. And really, he gets the thrill out of matching the pattern from one side of the mask to the other. And it's really, I would not have expected this from this guy. So it's really been nice to see that, and people finding new passions during this time. But, you know, Sandra, you talked about your nephew, right? Finding ways to keep occupied, and so, you know, to get through those anxious times, which sometimes can feel like all the time these days. So finding a new passion, finding a new hobby, a new skill to sort of keep us going. you know, get us through these times.
Love that.
Chloe, how's the yellow strip going?
Going really well. It's almost attached.
Nice.
And I don't know if yeah, okay, I have a good amount.
Anyone else want to share what they're doing? Oh, nice.
Nice.
Collaging away on a hoop, is that right?
That's something else I got somewhere for free, since I do buy a few things at Fabricville or Fabricland or whatever, but not very much. I mean, most of my stuff, you know, actually, if anybody else can attest to this, you kind of get a reputation where people have extra stuff and they're like, hey, do you want this? And I'm like, yeah, of course I want it. And so, and so then when you do stuff like that, then I think it kind of shifts their way of thinking, because the answer most of the time is like, oh, I never thought of, you know, quote unquote, keeping it. I never thought of using it in that way. And maybe this is another way to get people into thinking mindfully about waste and what they perceive as things as having only one use. Whereas if a person's a little bit on the creative side, then they can say, you're giving this to me, like, did you know you could do this with this and this and this and this, and then the wheels for them start turning.
Yeah, I saw briefly Violet. Do you want to share your little teddy bear, purple teddy bear again? No? I saw it very briefly. There was a little purple teddy bear that showed up from Violet. So thank you for sharing, Violet. That's really cool to see. We did a session just before, I think it was days before the shutdown in last March, where we had a little sewing session and made stuffed animals for the climate. Chloe, you joined in a little bit, right?
Yeah, it was the day. It was exactly the day before the lockdown.
Right.
I still haven't finished mine. It's actually I'm pretty sure I picked it up from CUCCR once you could go back briefly in the fall, but I think I left it at my work, and then that shut down as well. At the community center that I teach at. So I think that's living in a cupboard somewhere else now.
There's another story for you.
Hello.
Hi.
Speaking of stuffed animal, I'm making a stuffed Baymax from Big Hero 6.
Nice.
Wow. We're gonna put some stuffing in that we have, and then he'll have his own little tutu.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I also made one shortly after Christmas out of some felt, and I'm gonna get some fabric paint and put on Celebrate. So it's a little thing that we're doing.
Nice. Thanks for sharing.
That's so great.
Donna, you had something you wanted to share.
No, I was just saying that the errant a toy or teddy bear or project that maybe here and maybe there or maybe somewhere else. That's a very good story too.
Yeah, Chloe, you can tell tell the story of where it moved and what life it lived when we were all away in our homes.
It is a story indeed. Huh.
Cute.
Anna was mentioning the sort of this reclaiming that we do during the move out of students on campus normally. And in that move out, we collected a lot of old, like small towels. And so Chloe was talking about her stuffed animal, and I made a little polar bear out of the old towels. So that was my little polar bear for the climate stuffed animal.
I think I made, I used my own fabric scrap. I remember coming home from school one day and my sister had like these tins filled with miscellaneous sewing supplies that my grandmother had dropped off. And I just went through them and I found this piece of like upholstery fabric from like a rocking chair, like a plushy rocking chair that I guess used to be my grandmother's, and we had reupholstered, but I hadn't seen that fabric in so long, and I used that to create a kind of my little stuffed animal, which had a moon head. It was a kind of person with a moon head.
Nice.
Flap on.
Excuse me, it's Donna. I wanted to ask, what about, I remember sometimes they would, in the hall building, I would see as many floors, they would be sending people around who were just at the end of the term, and they were just emptying whatever people had left in their lockers who hadn't renewed their lockers. And I'm wondering if you guys, go around and take part in that now too.
So we do. We're really careful in that recuperation process. We do work with locker services to collect some of those materials, but we need to be really careful that students, and this is true of cleaning out studio spaces on campus as well, is that students have been given enough time to collect those items themselves. It's been a bit tricky, obviously, with COVID, but there was a lot of time given there, and so there has been some things collected from the lockers over this past year. So mostly it's unused notebooks and packs of paper and things like that. We just started to sort through it the other day. So yes, we do participate in that, as well as studio and classroom cleanouts around campus, both campuses, downtown and Loyola campus as well.
Also a lot of offices as the departments move to different locations on campus. They pack their essentials and pack their boxes of the important departmental stuff, but they leave behind kind of these remnants, things from the kitchen, things from different, like in the desks, like office supplies. And that's where we're really fortunate to be able to kind of swoop in and do a clean and gather up some of that usable material so that it doesn't end up in the landfill. But there's so much material on campus. That's what we found, is there's such an abundance, and it just takes a little bit of effort and some coordinating to make sure that we capture that.
A scary statistic was released not too long ago, I think just after the holidays, that there is now more man-made material out of the ground than there is usable material in the ground. So we've, as humans, have created more stuff, more material than is actually left to extract from the planet. So keep with that in mind, is to really embrace things like mending and things like, if you do need to purchase something that's going to last a long time, probably longer than your own lifetime. And put an emphasis on, making do with what you have around you. And if you don't, then what are the things around you that you could sort of put together to replace the thing that you're missing or that you feel that you're missing. There's so much, as Anna just said, in the world, in our own homes, in our own cities that we live in, that if we really are creative about it, which is what we're all about, we might not actually have to buy anything at all.
I won't, the sad thing too, is that much of that material that's been taken out, we've converted into things that can't return.
Yes, you're so right, Donna. So as we do purchase things and so on going forward, are we also putting an emphasis on things that could go back into what a lot of the time is referred to as the biosphere? So things that could be composted or a natural material that, if left behind, could go back to the planet.
Well, I agree with you totally there. A small change that I made for both my husband and I, we don't live together. We can't for financial reasons, but he has a Keurig, and he has a Keurig because it's easier for him. He's blind. So he was getting, like, you know, just the regular pods, and I've switched us. And I used to get the teapots. I don't buy the teapots anymore. I make my tea the old-fashioned way. I've taken that decision because the teapots are not recyclable and they're not renewable. The coffee pods, on the other hand, I found he likes the dark roast. So the President's Choice dark roast, the complete pod, everything, even the plastic, what looks like a plastic ring on it that sits at the top of the Keurig when you put it, that's made of the husk of the coffee bean plant. So the whole pod itself is completely recycled, like completely compostable. Very cool. So we switched to that. They're a little bit more expensive, maybe like $3 or $4 more for a box of 100, or a box of 72. But I figure it's worth it because we're not doing anything, like it's going to biodegrade, you know, in like a year, 6 months to a year. It's gonna, like, if you throw it in the compost, and I have a big bag to take over to one of the compost bins, or in the summer, in the spring when we start our garden, the community garden, I will take it over the compost bin there. But you know, it's just the little things that you do that make a big difference. So tiny little changes.
Absolutely.
One question is, what is the world going to do with all the disposable masks?
Oh dear, Donna, we need many more hours to discuss that one.
What I find disgusting is this disposable masks and the gloves you find on the ground as you're like rolling around. Like, I live in NDG, and as I'm rolling around the streets of NDG, I see so many like masks and plastic, and the gloves, you know, on the ground. Is like, really, people? And I mean, I prefer to wear my cloth masks, but when I go into a place like a hospital or a clinic, I will wear a disposable one, just because I feel that it's safer for me. But I try to avoid the disposable ones because they're exactly that. They're single-use, disposable, and you know, they're not recyclable.
Yeah, go ahead, Donna. No,
I have read that one precaution that you can do with your disposable masks is that you cut the cords off them when you throw them away, because they become death traps for animals. Again, like the plastic things for the hold the bundles of bottles and soft drinks together and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good start. I think there's different research that's coming out about the recyclability of those masks, but there's a lot of health and safety concerns to be aware of with that. I can't say anything definitively because it feels like it's constantly changing and the rules are changing. There's, in some cases, there's recommendations now for 3-layer masks. If you're using something like a fabric mask that has 2 layers, that you add a filter layer in the middle. But please read the latest, for wherever you are, read the latest guidelines for masks. I think there's something coming down soon that on campus here we'll have to be wearing surgical masks, but we're waiting on that change. But yeah, keep up to date with what's happening. If you see people throwing things away, ask them to maybe pick it up and dispose of it at home rather than leaving it on the street. And cutting off the ear loops, I think Donna is a great one to avoid that getting tangled anywhere.
I think that, okay. I think I may have originally read that it came through Twitter, maybe even from Margaret Atwood's feed.
People were talking about, before about crumbs to make quilts and or patches and things like that. If there's even smaller than crumbs, like I have little tiny pieces here, like I can't do anything with that, except I actually do save them because there's very little garbage that goes out of my house. And people were talking about stuffing bears or stuffing animals. You cut that up and all a bunch of other stuff you cut up. I have a mat with a rotary cutter that goes really fast, but that's not necessary. You can just take your scissor and just cut it, and it makes it small pieces that's perfect for filling bears and whatnot. And a lot of people will have like an old pillow, and the top part of the fabric is kind of yellow and all that, but inside there's amazing fiber fill that you don't have to purchase. You just cut, sometimes it's loose, but most of the time it's just kind of like this big roll, and you can actually open it up and unroll it, and that can become batting or for a quilt or a pillow, or you can use that batting or that fill. I'm probably not expressing myself, but I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm thinking a couple of people are getting what I'm saying, to use for stuffing bears or little cat toys or something like that. So I think it's the point that I'm making is if you kind of retrain your brain, you see things in a new way, and it does keep you out of the stores, or it can. And then you kind of, like I had something from my father's place and I recycled it. Like he had a pair of wool pants in his assisted living and they threw it in the wash. Anyways.
Oops.
However, I'm giving his wool pants, they're all cut up now that he's gone, doesn't know. And they're going to be the base pattern for a teddy bear for my great niece, which would have been her great grandfather. So the wool pants, which would have normally gone in the garbage, and an old pillow from his place that, didn't quite always get washed. That's going to be the stuffing. So when I give it to my great grandniece, I forget how do you say that, who's now not even 1. By the time I finish it, she'll probably be about 1.5, and then I'll be, as she starts to understand, or at least her parents will say, well, this was from her great grandfather. So, stuffing or leftover fabric, or like there's all a use for it. And that's what I love about CUCCR. And I know this is an unpaid plug, but you're memorializing it. You're putting it into practice where you're a repository of information of where you look at one thing, where people look at one thing, but you see 5.
Yeah. Well, and Suzanne, you're bringing up a thing that I've been seeing a lot more of lately, of people taking old clothing from a family member that's passed and turning it into a stuffed animal that either they can remember their family by, or I really like your example of passing it on to somebody that they'll never meet. Maybe they'll meet in the future sometime, but that, you know, there's a legacy there too, and a great way of upcycling an old piece of clothing.
The other thing that could be the small pieces of fabric, like the same thing with my embroidery thread. I have a little bag of like remnants of embroidery thread that I don't throw out because I have a friend who makes paper. And so the little pieces of fabric, like you literally like mince them up till they're almost like fluff. And she uses dryer lint. She uses my embroidery thread. She uses little pieces of fabric, like, and she got some, and the paper turns out like you've got it. The paper is like, the pulp is like a base gray. It's ugly, but when you add the different textures to it, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's beautiful stuff.
Love that.
And she uses it for stamping and card making, and I mean, I get a card from her almost every month. She sends me a card, just how you doing, you know, and we pick up the phone and talk to each other, but she just mails me out something, you know, and it's all on homemade cardstock, homemade paper.
Yeah, we were talking in the last session about just like how special mail feels these days. And I know that many of you didn't receive a package from us, but the idea of like, how can we show care through the systems that work for us, and mail being one of them, and sending a card or sending a little bit of artwork or sending a note really means a lot. And I think that that's a really good thing to remember. So, yeah.
And making these things to pass on, like they mean a lot. Like, you know, having things that are like keepsakes that you can pass on to the next generation. I mean, I have my grandmother's baby booties.
Wow.
Okay. Now my grandmother was born in 1915, and both my niece and nephew know that I have grandma's baby booties, and they've each claimed them. And I'm going, okay, well, you get one and you get one. I'm glad there's no more than 2 of them, because, but they know that I have them. They know that I have my father's bear. My father's bear is actually the craft bear. And the bear, my father, born in 36, grandma got it in 37. So yeah, he got the bear in 1937, and it's articulated.
Wow.
So the head moves, the arms move, the feet move. And my nephew has claimed that. My nephew says, that's mine, right? Because he knows, like, so these things, like, we might not think that they're important, but passing on the things that we make or the things that we have, and not throwing them out or not tossing them out, it means something to the next generation. It means something that I've kept the family lore, the family mementos, and that, you know, Stephen and Emily will get them. Oops, sorry about that. They will get them at some point. So the quilt that you're making, Anna, you know, like, put your name on it somewhere, embroider your name on it and a date, so that your great-great-grandchildren, if you go on to have children, will know, you know, that you made it at this date. You know, it's
so interesting to think of the mind switch when you're in the present, to be thinking about that future. Like I'm thinking about making this out of these scraps, and it's just like, a silly thing to do. But I agree. I do think that we should take good care and memorialize it now, and think about how it will be passed on, and that it's not just, sometimes it can be just time to fill with something to do, but somebody else might think that it's precious. I'm not really loving it enough to really make it super special just yet, but who knows? Maybe when it's all together.
Maybe when it's all together.
I think, I mean, I'm the sort of person who has this tendency to be the sort of cliche philosopher, but it really it's very important, because it makes us think that we owe something to the future, and it's a way of saying we still have hope, we still have faith that we're going to have a future. There's going to be generations coming who, children and grandchildren, it's not going to all of a sudden all fall apart. And that's important, because people have gotten almost in despair and saying, well, let's just party. And I think we have to think about that. We can survive. There will be hope. And like, this is just a very sort of homegrown way that people are investing in that. I mean, that's my take on it.
I agree with you. I think where there's life and where there's breath, there's hope. And I think if we quash that hope, I'm getting philosophical here, but if we quash that hope, there's no point in even getting up in the morning, and if we don't have a dream, like if we don't dream and we don't have a dream, or, a fantasy of what a future would look like, again, there's no point in getting up in the morning. And the natives have an expression, we do not own the land. We borrow it from our descendants. We borrow it from our children. And I think that's so important to keep in mind, that it's not our land, it's not our world. It's the future generations. Yes,
exactly, Sandra. And thank you, Donna, for sharing as well. And we have a few minutes left here, and I'd like you to wake up next week and join us for the next session, and feel like that's something to look forward to. I'm going to paste them in the chat here in a moment. And I want to just check back in with Chloe as we wrap up the session. So next week we have our build and tinker. So we've put some bits and pieces that you might be able to build something with. That's next Thursday from 1 to 2:30. And then we have our last session on Monday, February 22nd from 2 to 3:30. And that's the mystery envelope. So that envelope was full of pretty much everything that we sent everybody else. So you're welcome, whether you have a package or you don't, you're welcome to come and join us for those 2 sessions. I'm sending them now. And Chloe, let's check back in with you. You look like you got a whole corner going there on your pouch.
Yeah, I got my flat yellows stitched on. The pink, I did a bit of a border here. I feel like I should have continued this instead of cutting it like that. I would have had enough. Anyway, I still have to stitch on this, but I'm going to take a little break now, and perhaps join back in next week and stitch.
Yeah, we'll check back in on your pouch next week. Great.
And meanwhile, I think I'm going to put everything inside of it.
Great.
Can I just mention one last thing about what Anna was saying? And I think a lot of people feel that way about when they're crafting or making or whatever, and they say, well, it doesn't look nice, or it's kind of silly. But it's going to almost sound like I'm preaching, but it's like, what you have to remember when you've made the piece is not the piece itself, but like, what were you thinking about when you were making it? Like, you know, we're thinking about people that we've lost, people that we've lost too young, children that are yet to be born, how we're going to leave our mark on the planet. So the piece itself, okay, maybe you think it's silly, but the making of it is, and the thought process and how you're just kind of letting your mind wander, that's what makes it an important piece. Yeah. So I just want to put that into perspective for Anna. And I think a lot of people feel that way sometimes, like, oh, it's no big deal, or it's not nice, or it's just silly. But when you're making it, you're thinking of fairly important things in your life and milestones. And that's where you have to go back and say that your piece is important. So
yeah, so important. And that goes so, you know, back to the whole heart of this whole project was really that we're trying, you know, to build and think about care, and think about care for ourselves, and think about care for our communities, and care for the world and the earth that we're in. And these like recycled materials are a reminder of using what you already have, and using the gifts that are abundant around you, and to see those kind of potential in the unusual. So I really appreciate the people embracing these kind of envelopes and this idea filled with unconventional materials. And it's so wonderful to see how different everybody's work is, and how many different ideas are coming, whether you had the base kit or not. It's just really great to gather people here together during this time. And our time is up. So I see a little Anna again. Hello.
Just popped into the screen here just to thank you all for, well, first thanks to Anna, Ariane, and Chloe, of course, the CUCCR team here for joining us in virtual force space. And thank you for that final comment as well, Suzanne, because it really is highlighting the importance of the journey rather than the destination. And it's definitely something that we care for a great deal in the Force Space project in terms of process-based exploration, not kind of just presenting a finished product, but kind of the journey that you went on to get there. So on that note, as Ariane has already done, we invite you to join us for the next 2 sessions if you happen to be available. I myself am very excited about both the mystery and the tinkering, so I look forward to those sessions. And we wish you all a great end of the day. The sun is out if you're in Montreal, so maybe you can go outside and enjoy for a bit. Thanks, Chloe, for managing the SOCAM. We enjoyed watching you work. And thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us again.
Have a great day. We'll see you next.
Thank you.
Bye.